The crystalline walls of the Valerian royal chamber hummed with an energy that made Marcus Chen's teeth ache. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back in the formal diplomatic pose he'd practiced 1,000 times during the 3-month journey to this distant world. The alien princess sat before him on what could only be described as a throne made of living light, her forearms gracefully folded, her large violet eyes studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Princess Zaratiel was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality that shifted between deep blues and silver, and the intricate patterns that covered her elongated limbs seemed to move and breathe with their own life. She was easily 8 feet tall, even seated, and the crown of bone-like protrusions that grew from her skull marked her as royalty among the Valerians. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. The translation device implanted behind his ear converted her words into perfect English, but couldn't quite mask the alien cadence of her speech. "You have traveled very far to reach our world." "Indeed, Your Highness. The United Earth government is honored by your invitation to establish diplomatic relations." Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. 3 years of diplomatic training had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of her gaze. The throne room was vast, with walls that seemed to extend infinitely upward, disappearing into aurora-like glow. Other Valerians lined the chamber, their forms tall and elegant, whispering among themselves in their musical language. Marcus was acutely aware that he was the only human on a planet of beings who could crush him without effort. "Tell me, Marcus Chen," the princess continued, leaning forward slightly. The movement caused the light patterns in her skin to shift, creating hypnotic spirals. "What do you know of strength?" The question caught him off guard. This wasn't part of the briefing materials he'd memorized. "I'm not sure I understand, Your Highness." "Strength," she repeated, and now there was something almost predatory in her smile. "Your species is small, fragile. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears like paper. You live such brief lives, mere decades where we measure centuries." She gestured with one of her forearms toward the assembled court. "Any Valerian child could overpower your strongest warrior. Yet you crossed the void between stars to reach us. You dare to stand in our presence and speak of treaties and alliances." Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool air. This was definitely not going according to the diplomatic protocols. "Your Highness, humans may be physically different from Valerians, but we have our own strengths. Our technology brought us across space. Our determination drives us to explore and connect with other species." "Technology," she mused, rising from her throne. As she stood, Marcus was reminded again of just how massive she was. "Yes, we have studied your ships, your weapons, your tools. Crude but effective, we are told. But that is not what I mean by strength." She began to walk around him, her bare feet making no sound on the crystalline floor. Marcus forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at him to keep her in sight. In his peripheral vision, he could see the court watching with what he assumed was amusement. "I speak of the strength of spirit, Ambassador. The strength that allows a species to face the impossible and not break." She paused directly behind him, and he could feel the heat radiating from her larger form. 3 cycles ago, we sent scouts to observe your world. Do you know what they found?" Marcus's mouth went dry. The official reports had mentioned possible alien surveillance, but it had never been confirmed. "I was not made aware of any such observations, Your Highness." "Of course you weren't." She completed her circuit and stood before him again. "We watched your wars, your disasters, your struggles against your own planet's fury. We saw billions of your people facing extinction from disease, from starvation, from the violence of your own kind. We expected to find a broken species, perhaps one we might need to guide or protect." The princess's violet eyes seemed to glow more brightly. "Instead, we found something else entirely. Every time your species faced annihilation, you adapted. When disease struck, you created medicine. When your planet shook, you built stronger buildings. When you faced enemies, you stood together despite your differences. Most remarkably, when facing the vast emptiness of space, you decided to explore it rather than cower from it." Marcus felt his pulse quickening. There was something in her tone, something that suggested this conversation was leading somewhere dangerous.
Your species fascinates us, Marcus Chen.
In all our centuries of life, in all our travels across the galaxy, we have never encountered a people so resilient. So stubbornly determined to survive and thrive despite every disadvantage. She tilted her head, the gesture somehow both curious and threatening.
Which brings me to my question.
The throne room had grown completely silent. Even the whispered conversations had stopped. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Your government sent you here to negotiate trade agreements, to discuss mutual defense pacts, to establish what you called diplomatic relations.
The princess's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous.
But we both know that is not the real reason you are here. Marcus felt his carefully constructed diplomatic facade beginning to crack. Your Highness, I assure you that Earth's intentions stop. The word carried such authority that Marcus's mouth snapped shut involuntarily.
I am not interested in your government's official position. I am interested in the truth.
The truth that you carry in your mind, the truth that weighs on your shoulders like a burden. She leaned forward, bringing her face closer to his. This close, he could see that her violet eyes weren't uniform in color but contained swirling patterns like tiny galaxies. Tell me, Ambassador Marcus Chen, she said softly, her voice carrying easily in the vast chamber.
Why did humanity really seek us out? What desperation drives a species to reach across the void to alien worlds they know nothing about? What are you running from?
The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Marcus could feel the eyes of every Valerian in the chamber upon him. His hands, still clasped behind his back, were trembling slightly.
The princess waited, patient as a predator watching wounded prey.
Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Earth. Thinking of the classified briefings he'd received before departure. Thinking of the real reason behind humanity's sudden push into space, the desperate search for new worlds and new allies. The secret that his government had ordered him to hide at all costs. When he opened his eyes, Princess Zaratiel was still watching him with that terrible, knowing smile. He began, then stopped. His training warred with a sudden, overwhelming urge to simply tell the truth. Your Highness, there are certain aspects of Earth's situation that are classified.
Classified. She repeated the word as if tasting it. How very human. You create secrets even when facing extinction.
The word extinction hit Marcus like a physical blow. His carefully maintained composure finally cracked. How do you, he started, then caught himself.
But it was too late. The princess's smile grew wider.
Ah, she said, straightening to her full height.
Now we approach the truth.
The real truth, not the carefully crafted lies your diplomats have prepared. She began to circle him again, but this time her movements were those of a hunter who had caught scent of wounded prey.
We know, Marcus Chen. We have watched your star. We have seen the signs that your scientists try so desperately to hide from your own people.
We know why humanity has suddenly become so interested in making friends among the stars. Marcus felt the last of his diplomatic training desert him. His hands were shaking now, and he couldn't make them stop. The weight of the secret he'd carried across space, the knowledge that could cause panic across Earth if it became public, pressed down on him like a physical force. Your Highness, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper.
What exactly do you think you know?
Princess Zaratiel stopped directly in front of him. With one of her 4 hands, she reached out and gently lifted his chin, forcing him to meet her alien gaze. Her touch was surprisingly warm, and he could feel a slight electrical tingle where her skin contacted his. I know that your son is dying, Ambassador. Not in billions of years, as your kind once believed, but much sooner.
Much, much sooner.
Her voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made her words more terrifying. I know that your scientists have discovered something in your star's core, something that will kill everything in your solar system within the next few decades. And I know that your government has sent you here not to establish friendship, but to beg for sanctuary. The throne room spun around Marcus. All the air seemed to have been sucked from his lungs. The secret that Earth's governments had killed to protect, the knowledge that only a few hundred people across the entire planet were allowed to know, had just been spoken aloud in an alien court. He tried to speak, but no words came. Princess Zaratiel released his chin and stepped back, but her eyes never left his face. The question now, Ambassador, is whether you will continue to lie to me, or whether you will trust me with the truth your species so desperately needs to share. Her voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. Because if you are here seeking our help, there are things about the Valerian Empire that you need to understand. Things that will determine whether humanity lives or dies. Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. Everything he'd been trained to do, every protocol he'd memorized, every careful plan his government had made, had just become useless. The princess knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew the secret that could destroy civilization on Earth if it got out. But, more than that, she was offering something. Help. Hope. The very thing humanity had sent him across the galaxy to find, though he'd been forbidden from asking for it directly. Your Highness, he said finally, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. If we're going to discuss the truth, then, perhaps you're right. Perhaps it's time to put aside the diplomatic games. The princess smiled, and, for the first time since he'd entered the throne room, it seemed genuinely pleased rather than predatory. Excellent, she said. Then, let us begin again, Marcus Chen. But, this time, let us speak as two beings who understand that sometimes survival requires brutal honesty. She gestured toward a smaller chamber off to the side of the throne room. Come. There are things I must show you, and questions I must ask. And, I warn you now, the answers you give will determine the fate of every human being alive. As Marcus followed the alien princess away from the watching court, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking toward something that would change not just his mission, but the entire future of humanity itself. The weight of his species' survival pressed down on him, and, for the first time since leaving Earth, he wondered if the truth he'd been ordered to hide might be the only thing that could save them all. Behind them, the crystalline walls of the Valerian throne room continued to hum their alien song, and, in the patterns of light that danced through the chamber, observers might have seen the first stirrings of something that could either be humanity's salvation or its final doom. The smaller chamber Princess Zaratiel led him to was unlike anything Marcus had seen during his brief time on the Valerian homeworld. Where the throne room had been all crystalline grandeur and impossible architecture, this space felt almost intimate. The walls were a warm amber color, and, instead of the harsh geometric patterns that dominated Valerian design, here there were flowing organic shapes that reminded him oddly of Earth's forests. The princess gestured for him to sit on one of the low, cushioned platforms that served as furniture. As he settled himself awkwardly, she moved to a wall panel and touched it with one of her 4 hands. The amber walls suddenly came alive with images, stars, planets, swirling galaxies that seemed to move with genuine cosmic motion. This is our star map chamber, she explained, settling herself on a platform across from him. Even sitting, she towered over him. Here, we can observe the true state of the galaxy. Not the sanitized reports that reach our public or yours, but reality in all its terrible complexity. Marcus watched as the images on the walls shifted, focusing in on what he recognized as his own solar system. The familiar disk of planets orbiting around Sol looked peaceful, normal. But, as the princess manipulated the display, layers of data began to overlay the image. Energy readings, gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic signatures that painted a very different picture. Your star, the princess said softly, is dying. But, not in the way your scientists first believed. Tell me, Ambassador, what do your people understand about stellar collapse? Marcus took a breath, trying to gather his scattered thoughts. The diplomatic protocols were useless now, but his scientific background wasn't. Our physicists have theories. When a star runs out of fuel, it either expands into a red giant and gradually cools, or if it's massive enough, it collapses into itself catastrophically. Your theories are correct, as far as they go, Zaratiel said. But they assume natural stellar evolution. What your scientists discovered 18 months ago, the discovery that prompted this desperate diplomatic mission, was something far worse. The display zoomed in on Sol itself. Marcus could see the familiar sunspot patterns, the solar flares, the coronal mass ejections that Earth's satellites monitored constantly. But, there, deep in the stellar core, was something that made his blood run cold. A dark mass, growing like a cancer in the heart of humanity's star.
Stellar engineering, the princess said quietly.
Something, has been deliberately altering your sun's core structure.
Accelerating its collapse.
What should have been a natural process taking billions of years has been compressed into decades. Marcus felt as if he'd been punched.
That's impossible. Our sun is over 90 million miles from Earth.
The technology required to manipulate stellar cores is beyond anything we can imagine. Beyond anything humans can imagine, Zaratiel corrected. But humanity is not alone in the galaxy, Ambassador. You have stumbled into the middle of a war that has been raging for 10,000 years, and your species has become collateral damage. She touched the wall panel again, and the display pulled back to show a broader view of local space. Suddenly, Marcus could see things that human telescopes had never detected. Ships, massive beyond belief, moving between star systems.
Structures that dwarfed planets.
Energy signatures that suggested technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. The hegemony, the princess said, and there was something like hatred in her voice. An alliance of ancient species who believe that young races like humanity are inefficient, wasteful. They see the expansion of newer species as a threat to galactic stability. Marcus stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing.
You're saying that someone is deliberately destroying our sun to, what? Commit genocide against humanity? Not someone. Something.
The princess stood and moved closer to the display. One of her hands traced the path of what Marcus now realized was a massive fleet moving through space.
The hegemony is not driven by emotion or hatred as your kind understands it.
They operate on a logic that spans millennia. To them, eliminating a young species before it can spread too far is simply efficient resource management.
The ambassador felt sick.
Everything he thought he knew about humanity's situation had just been turned upside down.
But why us?
We've barely left our own solar system.
We're no threat to anyone. Aren't you?
The princess turned back to him, and there was something almost like admiration in her alien features. In 300 Earth years, your species went from primitive agriculture to space travel. In the last century alone, you've tripled your population, developed weapons that can destroy your own planet, and begun reaching for other worlds. The hegemony's projections suggest that, left unchecked, humanity could spread across 100 systems within 1,000 years.
But that's just projection, Marcus protested. We might never get that far. We might destroy ourselves first, or decide to stay on Earth.
The hegemony has been watching species rise and fall for millions of years, Zaratiel said. They have learned to read the signs. And humanity, Ambassador, shows every indication of becoming what they call a cascade species, one that spreads rapidly and adapts quickly to new environments. She moved back to her seat, but her eyes never left his face.
Tell me, Marcus Chen, when your people first learned that your son was dying, what was the immediate response of your governments?
Marcus thought back to the classified briefings, the emergency sessions, the desperate plans that had been proposed and discarded.
We began looking for ways to escape. Colony ships, generation ships, anything that could get at least some of humanity to another system before
your son destroys everything you've ever known, the princess finished.
Yes. And how many different escape plans were proposed? Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Marcus felt a growing sense of unease.
But most of them were impossible with our current technology. The distances involved, the resources required.
Yet your species didn't simply accept extinction.
You immediately began working on solutions, no matter how impossible they seemed.
Zaratiel leaned forward. Do you know what most species do when faced with inevitable doom?
Marcus shook his head.
They give up. They turn to religion, or hedonism, or simply wait for the end. But humans?
Humans looked at certain death and said no, we refuse to accept this. Within weeks, you had 100 different research projects working on faster-than-light travel, cryogenic systems, generational ships, terraforming technology. You even had teams working on ways to reignite your dying star. The princess's voice carried something that might have been awe. The hegemony has never encountered a species that responds to existential threats with such determination. Such aggressive creativity. They find it deeply threatening. So they decided to kill us all, Marcus said bitterly. They decided to accelerate your son's death to prevent you from having time to develop escape technologies, Zaratiel corrected. But they underestimated human adaptability. Even with your timeline compressed from millennia to decades, your species has made remarkable progress. This mission, this diplomatic outreach to unknown alien species, is proof of that. Marcus looked around the chamber, suddenly understanding the true weight of his situation. You're not just offering to help us, are you? You're involved in this war. The Valerian Empire has been fighting the hegemony for 6,000 years, the princess confirmed. We are what you might call the resistance. Species who believe that young races deserve the chance to grow and develop, not be eliminated for the convenience of ancient powers. She stood again, moving to another section of the wall display. This time, the images that appeared showed battle scenes on a scale that dwarfed anything in human military history. Fleets of ships engaging in combat across light years, weapons that could crack planets, defensive systems that turned entire star systems into fortresses. But we are losing, she said quietly. The hegemony is simply too old, too entrenched, too powerful. For every system we protect, they destroy 3 others. For every young species we save, 5 more are eliminated before we can reach them. Marcus felt a crushing weight settle on his chest. Then, there's no hope. For humanity or anyone else. I did not say that. The princess turned back to him, and now there was something fierce in her expression. The hegemony has one weakness, one flaw in their perfect logic. They cannot understand species like yours. She touched the wall panel again, and the display zoomed in on Earth. But, this time, instead of showing the dying sun, it focused on the planet itself. Marcus could see cities, shipping lanes, the orbital stations humanity had built. But, more than that, he could see something else, a kind of energy pattern that seemed to emanate from every human settlement. What is that? He asked, pointing at the strange energy signatures. That, the princess said with something like satisfaction, is what makes humanity so dangerous to the hegemony. You call it different things, innovation, creativity, ingenuity. But, what it really represents is your species' fundamental refusal to accept limitations. The display showed human activity across the planet in real time. Research facilities working on impossible projects. Engineers building machines that shouldn't work. Scientists pursuing theories that violated known physical laws. Artists creating beauty in the face of approaching doom. The hegemony operates on the principle that all things have limits, Zaratiel explained. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly static. They haven't made a fundamental breakthrough in 10,000 years. They simply refine and perfect what they already know. Marcus was beginning to understand. But humans keep inventing new things. Humans keep breaking the rules, the princess corrected. The hegemony has calculated the maximum possible technological advancement for any species based on age, resources, and development patterns. According to their models, humanity should be at least 1,000 years away from faster-than-light travel. Yet your scientists achieved crude FTL capability in just 20 years once they understood it was possible. The display shifted to show human colony ships, primitive by Valerian standards but functional. Ships that had carried Marcus and other diplomatic missions to alien worlds across dozens of light years. The hegemony expected your son's accelerated death to catch you before you could develop escape technologies. They were wrong. They expected your species to fragment and panic in the face of extinction. Instead, you united and focused your entire civilization on survival. They expected you to beg for sanctuary from more advanced species. Instead, you've been trying to negotiate as equals. Marcus looked at the images of human achievement surrounding him and felt something he hadn't experienced since learning about Earth's doom. Pride. Not just in humanity's accomplishments, but in their refusal to simply lie down and die. So what happens now? He asked. You know our secret, you know why we're really here. Are you going to help us? Princess Zaratiel was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays around them. Finally, she turned back to him with an expression he couldn't read. That depends, Ambassador, on whether you're willing to help us in return. Because what I'm about to propose will change everything. Not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy. Marcus felt his pulse quicken.
What are you talking about?
The Valerian Empire has been fighting a defensive war for millennia, the princess said. We save who we can, protect what we can, but we've never been able to truly strike back at the hegemony. They're too entrenched, too powerful, too perfectly organized. She moved closer to him, and he could see the intensity burning in her alien eyes. But you, Marcus Chen, represent something they've never encountered before.
A species that doesn't know when to quit.
A people who look at impossible odds and see challenges to overcome rather than reasons to surrender. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper.
What if, instead of simply offering humanity sanctuary, we offered them something else? What if we offered them the chance to fight back?
Marcus felt the chamber spinning around him.
Fight back? Against beings who can manipulate stars? We're one small planet with primitive technology. What could we possibly do against the hegemony?
The princess smiled, and, for the first time since he'd met her, it looked genuinely happy. You could do what humans do best, Ambassador. You could break the rules.
You could find solutions that no one else has thought of.
You could refuse to accept that this war can't be won. She reached out with one of her 4 hands and touched his shoulder.
The hegemony has never faced a species like humanity in open combat.
They have no idea what you're capable of when you're cornered and fighting for survival. Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. Everything he'd thought he knew about his mission, about humanity's future, about the galaxy itself, had just been completely rewritten. You're not offering us sanctuary, he said slowly.
You're offering us a war. I'm offering you hope, Princess Zaratiel said.
The chance to save not just humanity, but every young species the hegemony would destroy. The chance to prove that the galaxy belongs to all of us, not just the ancient powers who want to control it. She stood and moved back to the star map, gesturing at the vast scope of the galactic conflict. But the choice must be yours, Marcus Chen. I will not lie to you, this path is dangerous beyond imagination. If humanity agrees to fight alongside us, your species will become a primary target of the most powerful force in the galaxy.
Many of your people will die. Perhaps all of them.
Marcus looked at the display showing Earth, still turning peacefully in space, unaware that its fate was being decided in an alien chamber light years away. But, the princess continued, if you choose to fight, you'll die as free beings, with the chance to save others and strike back at those who would destroy you.
And, if you win.
She turned back to him, and her smile was fierce.
If you win, humanity will have helped reshape the galaxy itself.
Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of the people back on Earth. The billions who didn't know their son was dying, who trusted their governments to find a solution.
The scientists working frantically on escape plans. The families hoping for a future they might never see.
When he opened his eyes, Princess Zaratiel was watching him with patient intensity.
I need to know more, he said finally. About this war, about what you're really asking of us, about what humanity would be getting into. He paused, then added, and I need to know if we even have a choice. Because it sounds like the hegemony is going to destroy us either way. The princess nodded approvingly.
Those are exactly the right questions, Ambassador.
And I will answer all of them.
But, first, you must answer mine. Her expression grew serious.
Are you prepared to hear the complete truth about what humanity faces? Because once you know everything, there will be no going back.
No comfortable lies, no diplomatic evasions.
Only the choice between extinction and war.
Marcus thought of his orders, his training, his government's careful plans for this mission. All of it seemed like a child's game compared to what he was facing now. But, he thought of Earth, of humanity's stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds, of the courage it had taken to send him across the galaxy in search of hope.
Yes, he said firmly. I'm ready for the truth. All of it.
Princess Zaratiel smiled, and the star maps around them began to shift, showing new images, new data, new revelations that would reshape Marcus's understanding of everything.
Then, let us begin with the real story of the war for the galaxy, she said. And the reason why humanity might be the key to ending it. The wall displays came alive with images that defied Marcus's understanding of warfare. Not the ship-to-ship battles he'd seen earlier, but something far more fundamental and terrifying. Entire star systems being reshaped, planets moved from their orbits, the very structure of spacetime being manipulated like clay in the hands of gods. This is what we truly face, Princess Zaratiel said, her voice heavy with the weight of millennia. The hegemony doesn't simply conquer systems, they remake them according to their vision of efficiency. Every world becomes identical, every population becomes standardized, every trace of uniqueness is eliminated. Marcus watched in horror as the display showed world after world being transformed. Diverse ecosystems stripped away and replaced with uniform geometric structures. Different species being herded into identical settlements or simply removed. Art, culture, individual expression, all of it erased in favor of cold efficiency. How many, he whispered. How many species have they destroyed? In the last 10,000 years? Over 40,000 distinct civilizations have been either eliminated or completely assimilated. The princess's 4 hands clenched into fists. Each one unique, each one irreplaceable. Gone forever. The display shifted to show the current state of the galaxy. Vast swaths of space marked in cold blue, indicating hegemony control. Scattered pockets of red showing the dwindling resistance territories. And, between them, empty spaces, systems that had been stripped of all life, turned into resource extraction zones or simply abandoned once they'd served their purpose. This is why your species terrifies them, Zaratiel continued. Not because of your technology or your weapons, but because of what you represent. Chaos. Unpredictability. The fundamental refusal to be standardized. Marcus studied the galactic map, noting how small the resistance territories had become. You're losing. Badly. Even with our help, what difference could one more species make against something this vast? The princess touched the wall panel, and the display zoomed in on a seemingly empty region of space near the galactic core. But, as the image enhanced, Marcus could see something that made his breath catch. A massive structure, larger than star systems, built around what looked like a black hole. The heart of order, Zaratiel said quietly. The hegemony's central command structure. From here, they control their entire empire through a network of quantum communication nodes. Every ship, every world, every soldier receives instantaneous orders from this central intelligence. Marcus leaned forward, studying the impossible architecture. It's like a giant computer. More than that. It's a collective consciousness that spans the galaxy. Every hegemony entity is connected to it, sharing information, coordinating perfectly. They have no individual thoughts, no personal desires, no capacity for the kind of creative chaos that drives human innovation. The princess moved closer to him, her expression intense. But, that perfect coordination is also their greatest weakness. If the heart of order were destroyed, their entire empire would collapse into chaos. Billions of ships and soldiers would be cut off from central command, left to operate on whatever basic programming remains. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. You're talking about striking at their command center. But, look at the size of that thing, it's defended by fleets that dwarf entire star systems. How could anyone get close enough to attack it? Anyone couldn't, Zaratiel agreed. But, humans could. Because you don't think like the rest of us. The display changed again, showing detailed schematics of the heart of order. Marcus could see the defensive networks, the patrol routes, the sensor arrays that monitored approach corridors across light years. It looked absolutely impregnable. The hegemony designed their defenses based on 10,000 years of warfare against conventional enemies, the princess explained. Species that follow logical attack patterns, that approach military problems with systematic planning, that operate within known parameters of physics and strategy. She gestured at the schematics, highlighting what looked like gaps in the defensive coverage. But, humans don't fight logically. Your military history is filled with victories achieved through tactics that shouldn't work, strategies that violate conventional wisdom, and weapons that break the rules of how war is supposed to be fought.
Marcus thought of human military history, the unexpected victories, the impossible odds overcome, the times when desperation had led to breakthrough innovations. You want us to find a way to attack something that's supposed to be unattackable. I want you to do what humans do when faced with an impossible challenge, Zaratiel said. I want you to refuse to accept that it's impossible. The display shifted once more, this time showing Earth's current situation. The dying sun, the desperate research projects, the colony ships being built with technologies that shouldn't exist yet. But, overlaying all of this was something new, data streams showing how human innovations were already exceeding hegemony projections. Your species has 18 months before your sun reaches critical instability, the princess said. In that time, the hegemony expects you to either die out or flee to distant colonies where you can be hunted down individually. They have not planned for the possibility that you might unite the entire resistance in a final assault on the heart of order. Marcus felt the weight of what she was proposing settle on his shoulders.
You're talking about betting everything on one massive gamble. If we fail, the galaxy continues its slow death under hegemony rule, Zaratiel finished. But, if we succeed, every young species gets the chance to grow and develop freely. Every world gets to keep its uniqueness. Every civilization gets to choose its own path. She moved to another section of the wall, and the display showed something that made Marcus's heart leap with hope. Ships. Thousands of them, from dozens of different species, all bearing the markings of the resistance. But, more than that, production facilities, research stations, whole worlds dedicated to building the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. The resistance has been preparing for this moment for centuries, the princess explained. We've been building ships, training crews, developing weapons specifically designed to breach the heart of order's defenses. But, we've been missing one crucial element, the tactical unpredictability that only humanity can provide. Marcus studied the massive fleet, trying to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. How many ships? 40,000 combat vessels. Another 100,000 support craft. Crews from 300 different species, all united in the belief that the galaxy belongs to everyone, not just the ancient powers who want to control it. She turned back to him, and there was something like hope in her alien features. But ships and weapons alone won't be enough. The hegemony has faced large fleets before. They know how to counter conventional attacks. What they don't know how to counter is human ingenuity applied to galactic warfare. The display zoomed in on specific elements of the resistance fleet, and Marcus could see modifications he didn't recognize. Weapons that seemed to blend technologies from multiple species. Defensive systems that followed no standard patterns. Ship designs that looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts but somehow worked better than anything in the official specs. We've been preparing for years to integrate human tactical doctrine into our forces, Zaratiel explained. Every species in the resistance has contributed their best innovations, but we've left room for human improvements. Your people's talent for making impossible things work, for finding solutions that no one else would even attempt. Marcus felt a mix of terror and excitement building in his chest. You want humanity to help lead this assault. I want humanity to save the galaxy, the princess said simply. Because you're the only species we've encountered that's stubborn enough to try. She moved back to her seat, settling her massive form with careful grace. But, I will not lie to you about the costs, Marcus-Chen. If humanity joins this war, your homeworld becomes a primary target. The hegemony will throw everything they have at Earth, trying to prevent your escape. Billions of your people will die. The display showed projected casualty estimates, and Marcus had to close his eyes against the numbers. Even in the best-case scenarios, humanity would lose more than half its population. However, the princess continued, if you choose this path, those who survive will be free. Free to spread across the galaxy, free to develop your technologies and cultures as you see fit, free to ensure that no other species faces the choice between assimilation and extinction. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the alien princess who held his species' fate in her 4 hands. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to return to Earth with the truth. All of it. The dying sun, the hegemony, the war that spans the galaxy, and the choice that faces humanity. She leaned forward, her violet eyes intense.
Your government sent you here to negotiate sanctuary for a few million refugees. I'm offering you the chance to save billions and reshape the galaxy in the process. Marcus thought of his orders, his diplomatic protocols, the careful lies he'd been instructed to tell. All of it seemed like a betrayal now, in the face of what he'd learned. The governments of Earth won't want to hear this, he said slowly. They'll want to take the safe path, evacuate who they can and hope the hegemony loses interest in hunting down human colonies.
Then, it will be up to you to convince them otherwise, Zaratiel said. Because the safe path leads to extinction. The hegemony doesn't lose interest. They don't forget.
They will hunt down every human colony, every refugee ship, every last survivor until your species is completely erased. She stood and moved to the wall display one final time. The images that appeared showed the final fate of dozens of species who had tried to hide from the hegemony. Scattered colonies found and destroyed years or decades after their homeworlds fell. Refugee fleets hunted across the galaxy until the last ship was eliminated. This is what safety offers, the princess said grimly. A slower death, but death nonetheless. Marcus stared at the images, feeling the last of his illusions about humanity's situation crumble away. There was no safe path. There was no compromise solution. There was only the choice between dying slowly and fighting back. If I take this back to Earth, he said carefully, if humanity agrees to join your war, what guarantee do we have that it will make any difference? You said yourself that the hegemony has been winning for 10,000 years. The guarantee, Zaratiel said, is that for the first time in those 10,000 years, they'll be facing something they don't understand.
Human creativity, human stubbornness, human refusal to accept defeat.
Combined with the accumulated knowledge and resources of 300 allied species.
She turned back to him with a smile that was both alien and unmistakably hopeful.
Besides, Ambassador, when has your species ever let impossible odds stop you from trying? Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but something equally powerful, the fundamental human conviction that any problem could be solved if enough people worked hard enough to solve it. There's something else, he said slowly.
If we do this, if humanity joins your war and we somehow manage to win, what happens afterward? What kind of galaxy do we build to replace the hegemony? The princess's smile widened.
That, Marcus Chen, is the most human question you could possibly ask. The hegemony has controlled the galaxy for so long that most species have forgotten what it means to plan for a future where they're free to choose their own destiny. The wall display shifted to show something entirely different, star charts with no territorial markings, no control zones, no restricted areas.
Just stars and planets, waiting for whoever might want to explore them.
A galaxy where every species gets to develop at their own pace, Zaratiel said.
Where young civilizations aren't eliminated for being inconvenient.
Where diversity is celebrated rather than standardized away. Where the only limit to what any species can achieve is their own imagination and determination. Marcus looked around the chamber one last time, taking in everything he'd learned, everything that had been offered and everything that had been asked in return. The weight of his species' future pressed down on him, but, for the first time since learning about Earth's dying sun, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a challenge. I'll take your proposal back to Earth, he said finally.
All of it.
The truth about our sun, the truth about the hegemony, and the choice you're offering us.
The princess nodded approvingly. And what will you tell them when they ask for your recommendation?
Marcus thought of Earth, of humanity's long history of choosing the difficult path when it was the right path. Of a species that had never learned when to quit, that looked at every setback as a puzzle to be solved rather than a reason to give up. I'll tell them that we're humans, he said firmly.
And humans don't go quietly into the night.
Princess Zaratiel's laugh was like music, alien but genuinely joyful. Then, perhaps there is hope for the galaxy after all. As Marcus prepared to return to his ship, to carry the most important message in human history back to Earth, he realized that the princess had been right about one thing. When faced with an impossible choice, humans had a tendency to create a third option that nobody else had considered. The hegemony expected humanity to choose between extinction and assimilation.
Princess Zaratiel offered them the chance to choose freedom through warfare.
But Marcus suspected that his species would find a way to choose something else entirely, victory. And, for the first time since leaving Earth, he couldn't wait to get home.